If you want to break into the world of male medieval history shows, you gotta have blood.
From the channel that brought you Night Fight, and the studios that keep bringing you these shows, comes a new show, so graphic in its depiction of God's love, so intense in its devotion to the Trinity, that it could only have one name. Julian.
Julian's mystical theology is soaked with blood. At one point, she invites the whole world to climb into the wound in Christ's side. Who does that? Medieval mystics, that's who. Tonight, we take a look inside this season's hottest show.
I'm Natalie Hart, a producer with the History Channel. A few weeks ago, a talented writer named Zena Arlig came to us with an idea for a show that piqued my interest.
The world of medieval historical shows is like a total sausage fest. We need a medieval woman. Get a show about her. I thought back to when I was an English lit major at NYU, Humanities, Julian of Norwich.
It's a show to balance out the super macho war medieval shows that we have in our schedule right now. It's a show about a woman mystic named Julian of Norwich.
You want blood? Julian. You want suffering? Julian. You want the all-encompassing love of God? Julian. She was our woman.
Now Zena has some ideas about Julian. She's made some conclusions.
And then we thought, what's going to make people sit down and watch a show about Julian of Norwich? Zombies.
Conclusions that I'm concerned about.
We don't know that Julian wasn't a zombie queen. Julian died, basically, when she was having her vision. It comes to her as her life breath is getting breathed out. And I thought, what better backdrop than being tucked into an anchor hold, can't leave. Julian of Norwich survived 3 waves of plague. Julian of Norwich lived into her mother-forking 80s. It was the 15th century, people. I rest my case. I bring the show idea to Natalie Hart over at the History Channel, and she's like, sounds good, but she gave me a historical consultant.
So I've brought in renowned medievalist Bathilda Kuiper.
Ever since Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was filmed, historians have been looking for new angles into traditional classics, and I think Zena probably was sparked by, frankly, the violence, and there is quite a bit of death and quite a bit of, we do watch a body suffer and dry up.
Zena has some ideas because Julian gets the last rites before she goes into her anchor hold, and then she lives
during her vision. Yes,
and then she
1373.
And then she lived to a very great age in her 80s.
Yes, at least her 70s. We're not entirely sure when she dies, but we do know she's still alive in 1416.
And that's quite old in that time period.
Considerably, yes.
Hard no on the zombie queen.
Oh, it's intellectually irresponsible to espouse the view that Julian of Norwich was a zombie queen. That historian, she keeps telling me Julian was not a queen zombie. Show me your proof that Julian wasn't a queen zombie.
But you're going a big yes on the blood.
Julian's mystical theology is soaked with blood. Christ's blood. When she's looking at this crucifix, which would have just been a simple wooden figure, she begins to see the blood flowing down Christ's face. And it's while she's looking at the head of Christ that she begins to receive her 16 revelations.
I've been very excited that Julian is very honoring of the physical, honoring of the body, that the body is a connection to Christ, not just the soul or the spirit. Could you talk about that, please?
It's Christ's taking on of the human nature, and in her vernacular theology.
Could you explain vernacular theology, please?
Oh, yes, of course. Julian is the first woman writer that we have a complete book of in English, to the best of our knowledge. She doesn't need to be a zombie queen to be interesting. She just needs to be herself. For Julian, it's physical nature that gets redeemed. It's not this sort of airy-fairy, the Julian of Norwich inspirational posters. They only ever say, all will be well, and they forget to say that the person who tells her all will be well is the bleeding head of a dying savior. You have someone here who would have watched loved ones die of the plague, and to whom God appears suffering in some of the same ways that plague victims would have suffered, and telling Julian, assuring her that all will be well. It's not an empty promise. It's a promise coming from someone who has suffered more than anyone else could. Christ becomes human, and therefore, with Christ's redemption of human nature, our natures become redeemed.
Zena's got some language in some of the scripts that I would like to get your take on this.
Yes,
now,
yes.
in the language in the scripts, she refers to Jesus, to the Christ, as the beloved, which is very much lover language.
Oh, the mystics are so wonderful.
But also brother and mother. So lover, brother, mother.
Yes.
What's going on with that? Is that in her writing?
Yes. The trope of Christ as mother, not simply the Son of God, but mother to humanity, becomes quite prominent, and Julian is one of the people who takes this beautiful picture of God as the mother we run to, and has the same Christ who bleeds and suffers and dies become whole and hearty and hale, and then welcome us as children, as our mother.
As you viewers know, most of the shows that we've got right now, most of our medieval shows, there's a lot of there are a lot of people doing a lot of bad things. How does Julian deal with evil? Because in most of our shows, they deal with evil with a giant sword.
It's a very astute question.
Thank you.
You must have been a very good student.
Well, thank Professor VanDyke, my philosophy professor in college.
I will. Thank you. Yes, she's okay. So, when evil happens, Julian sees human beings as making evil choices out of ignorance and out of frailty and out of fear. And so she tells us we search for things. We search for things. We try to fill this empty space. And it's a space that she says can only be filled by God. And so we do evil things. We don't act. She, as you said, she lives in this calamitous time. She lives in a time of great conflict and turmoil, and and she's aware of all of this. She was an anchorite, but that doesn't mean she was isolated. People would come to her. They would bring her news. They would bring her books. And so when she responds that God does not show her evil in the hearts of human beings, that God shows her love, and that God isn't wrathful toward the human beings, it's radical at its time. It's not long after this, in fact, that you're not allowed to write theology in the vernacular anymore. They were worried that this was encouraging people to speculate too much about spiritual things.
All right, that's good to know. And I do want to circle back to some things from when you were talking about that evil is not part of the human nature.
Yes.
So in the show that Xena is writing, she will not be able to write any character who, say, is evil because they enjoy being evil, and that's their character motivation.
Well, no, Julian doesn't deny that there are people who could enjoy evil actions.
Okay.
What she doesn't think that humanity itself is evil. The sort of Calvinistic worldview where we're totally depraved and sinful to our core, it's just not there in what she sees in God.
I may want to emphasize that a little bit more to Xena. I find the I enjoy doing evil trope to be very tired television.
Oh, I could not agree more. We have such good models with Julian. Social political philosophy, social political theology. There's so much to explore. The blood that she sees is actually very politically and spiritually significant because at this point in time, the priests would have been the ones who would have been taking the wine, the blood of Christ at communion, and the common people would not have. And so when Julian describes it as poured out for all, and when Julian welcomes us into Christ's side, it's a beautiful offering to everyone. It's her message of comfort is a radical one to a very worried, anxious people. The political unrest, the social turmoil from plagues and pandemics. Julian's message is that God promises to make all things well.
We're going to actually circle back to an earlier question that I had, the whole mother-brother-lover language that Julian uses. So much language about the beloved. And Julian was a nun. And now...
No. It's a good question. That a common misperception. Julian of Norwich was not a nun. Julian of Norwich was an anchorite.
Oh, so she was not a nun before she became an anchorite.
We do not know.
Okay.
She may have been there's speculation that she was a Benedictine nun, but we do not know. Some people have actually argued that she may have been a common lay person. She may have been married and lost children and a husband to the plague, partly motivating her move to the anchor hold. Yes,
Are there rumors? Are there ideas about sex in the anchor hold?
Oh, no. If you know anything about anchor holds, the windows were intentionally made far too small for people to go in or out of. No. If Julian was walled in, there would have been no way. Her servants, perhaps, if you need love interests, her servants, her friends, Marjorie Kemp, if you need too much sex, you go to Marjorie Kemp.
Oh, noted.
Yes. But no, Julian would not be sex having. In fact, I think it's very beautiful in her revelations how she emphasizes the maternal and caregiving role of God over the beloved and spousal role that we find in so many other pieces of literature in the 13th and 14th centuries.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to tell me about Julian's life that you think would be useful and would be just a great vein for Xena to tap into?
Yes. Knowledge of self.
Knowledge of self.
It might not sound sexy, but for Julian, the knowledge of God and the knowledge of self are intrinsically interrelated, and I really feel that you could make a fascinating show where, rather than roaming the streets of Norwich chopping down zombies, Julian simply comes to know herself better and to be more closely joined to God that way. There's literally nothing more exciting than becoming one with God, wouldn't you say?
Personally exciting. Here at the History Channel, we also need things that are visually exciting.
Oh, that
and it is unfortunately
that
most self-knowledge just involves looking off into the middle distance, which appears in every show.
It does.
But just for a moment.
I will think about this. There are some the visions of Christ dying are very grim. You could definitely do something with that.
All right. I may have to draw you in to have some conversations with Xena.
She's a excitable young thing. It's always good to see someone excited about Julian.
It is. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Special thanks as always to Andrew Arlig for his skillful camera work.
People always say, when you got a set full of girls, you're gonna have drama. I ain't gonna lie. There's been some drama. That historian, she keeps telling me Julian was not a queen zombie. I mean, can she prove it? I don't think so. Show me your proof that Julian wasn't a queen zombie, and then I'll walk it back.